The movie begins with a couple, Kat and Jim, who are fast asleep in bed, but wake up just before the alarm goes off. Kat instantly gets up from the bed to prepare for the day, but Jim hopes that she can take the morning off. Kat declines, stating that she has a meeting that morning that she cannot miss. So she urges the man to get up from the bed as well. Kat reminds Jim of a trip they have planned for the next weekend. However, Jim didn't include this in his schedule. This trip clashes with a shoot he has with Barry, his friend. However, the shoot would be determined by the weather. Kat is upset about the sudden change of plans, but Jim tries to tell her that it's a German ad agency with good pay. This doesn't move Kat, and she's still upset. She put in a lot of effort to make herself available for that vacation, as she's only given 10 vacation days in a year. Jim apologizes, however, he needs that job. Kat, though, is still very upset, so she leaves the room. Jim does not stop pleading and apologizing. He hopes he can work things out with Kat. That morning, while Jim has breakfast, he begins to go through the internet. Something called the Alvin virus is trending. Jim watches a video on YouTube of a doctor explaining that this is no regular flu, and that experts are terrified of the mutation potential of the virus. Though the doctor tries to vividly educate them on the virus, no one cares, not even the presenter on the channel. The presenter claims there have been no losses yet, so there's no need to fret. However, the doctor remains persistent on the dangers of the virus. As Jim puts his phone down, he goes to stand outside and enjoy the view from his balcony. The day is beautiful and the atmosphere is calm. But just then, he sees someone standing aimlessly on the rooftop. Jim calls on them, and as they turn around, they have a shot of blood on their shirt and an unsettling appearance. Kat sees Jim standing all alone outside and taps him on his shoulder, startling him. Jim wants to know if Kat saw what he did, or if it's his mind playing games, but she didn't. He turns back around and sees that the mysterious figure is gone. This makes the whole situation concerning. Still outside, Jim meets his neighbor, Mr. Lin, who comes out to water his plants. He's suffering from a cold, and when Jim suggests that he go to the hospital, Mr. Lin objects. To him, it's the same old routine. Doctors telling him to stay home and rest. He doesn't trust the health sector and believes that it's all a charade. This leads Mr. Lin to the topic of the virus that everyone's talking about. Mr. Lin believes it's all just a hoax, set up by private individuals, all to manipulate the economy and make a profit for their businesses. The two end their discussion, and Jim heads out with Kat. Just before Jim leaves, he has a low battery and decides to plug in his phone. Jim rides Kat to the train station on his bike. As they ride down the streets, they observe the atmosphere. It's quite chaotic and gruesome. Police cars and ambulances all over the place with corpses and injured individuals. Eventually, Jim drops Kat off to continue her journey on the train. He hopes to make her feel better, so he promises to prepare dinner. The two part ways, and Jim zooms off on his bike. As Jim returns home, he notices that the place that had been crowded with authorities is now oddly calm. He later stops by a restaurant to order coffee. While he awaits his order, he begins to read through some magazines there. While Jim reads, the man over the counter tells him that the pandemic is really affecting the real estate market, and properties are now cheaper than they were in the previous year. The restaurant is calm as everyone quietly has their meals. Suddenly, an elderly individual wearing a nightdress walks into the restaurant. Two men who are seated on a table right in front of her notice her awkward entrance. One of the men decides to approach her and ask her what the matter is. As she turns around, she wears a terrifying look. The man is startled by her appearance, and the woman instantly spits a fluid on his face. The once quiet and serene restaurant becomes rather chaotic within seconds. The old woman turns to the man over the counter, takes out the fries that are cooking in the corner, and pours it over the man's face. This causes his skin to burn, and the old woman begins to peel off his burning skin, causing the man to scream in agony. Jim tries to stop the old woman, and this draws her attention to him. She begins to approach him slowly. Jim looks at the man whom the old woman had spat on, and he sees that he has suddenly become violent and is attacking people at the restaurant. Jim slowly retreats from the restaurant, but the woman follows him closely. As Jim tries to get away from the woman, she suddenly gets hit by a car. Slightly relieved, he walks up to the woman's body lying flat on the vehicle that just hit her. But then, Jim is suddenly surrounded by more gory-looking individuals that are out to attack him. He instantly runs for his life, but they pursue him. Jim fears for his life. He manages to arrive at his apartment and hopes that the violent individuals won't catch up with him. He hides behind a door to catch his breath. Jim is dehydrated, quite understandable as he ran a few blocks to get home. He rushes to get a drink from his fridge. When he does, he gulps the whole thing down within seconds. Never would he have predicted his day to turn out like this. Jim turns on the TV, but none of the channels are active. They all claim to be in a civil emergency. Jim can't help but worry about Kat. He keeps calling her but gets no response. He then sends a text inquiring about her well-being. He's glued to the screen of his phone as he types. In the text, he states that people are losing their minds, and he worries for her. Jim further instructs her not to come to him, but rather, he will come to her. At that moment, Jim loses awareness of his surroundings, and he doesn't realize that someone is slowly making their way inside the apartment. Luckily, Jim sees a shadow on the wall and turns around just in time to protect himself from Mr. Lin, who is about to attack him with garden scissors. Jim holds the blade firmly. However, in the process of struggling, his fingers get in the way of the blade, and it's immediately chopped off. Despite this, Jim does not relent. He picks up a pan and uses it to hit Mr. Lin on his head, causing him to pass out. Jim hurriedly makes his way out of the apartment, his hand still bleeding. He now has to face a great number of violent and unstable groups outside, so Jim gets on his bike and immediately begins to speed away. Unfortunately, Jim is not invisible and is seen by the violent group, who instantly pursue him. Meanwhile, Kat is on a train. She's seated quietly and busy with a novel she's reading. A man seated beside her becomes intrigued. He finds it fascinating that Kat is reading a novel and not on her phone. He claims that no one reads books on trains anymore, but rather while away their time with their phones. Kat becomes increasingly uncomfortable with the man's incessant talking and intrusion. She just wants to read her novel quietly, but the man won't give her space. When she tells him to let her be, he tells her that he has been seeing her on that train quite often, and he hopes to finally express his feelings to her. The man tells Kat that he finds her attractive, but Kat isn't flattered. She just wants her space and hopes the man respects that. The man still refuses to let Kat be, and Kat becomes enraged at the man's persistence. She even threatens to call the police on him for her. The man gets offended by Kat's rejection. Kat, fed up with having to sit next to him throughout the ride, gives up her seat to another woman who gets into the train. It's all easy going on the train until there is a sudden outburst of gore and violence on the vehicle. One of the infected people had made his way into the train, posing as a normal human being. It's a gruesome scene, a bloodbath in fact, as everyone begins to attack each other. Kat manages to get off the train, but she leaves her phone behind and Jim's unread messages. Kat runs to safety. She takes along with her an injured girl, the one whom she had given up her seat for earlier. The girl has a punctured eye and can't continue running. She tells Kat that she can't breathe, and she falls. Kat still has hope for them. She believes they can get to an exit in time to get eye treatment for the woman. Just then, the man who sat next to Kat earlier begins to pursue Kat and Molly. Kat is terrified. The man is coming at them quickly, and Molly can barely stand on her 2 feet. As they continue to run, they bump into another man, but this one is normal. Kat pleads for him to help them. When he realizes the danger that the 2 women are running from, he instantly challenges the violent man approaching. Unfortunately for the big guy, he isn't strong enough, and the old man bites his nose off, and then proceeds to attack him with an axe. Kat and Molly realize that the only solution they have is to keep running, and so the 2 women flee. However, it's difficult for Kat to run with Molly dragging her down. She tries to encourage Molly not to give up on her, but it's a huge ask. Luckily, they make it to the exit, and Kat is upset that the security didn't help them sooner. The security man tries to explain that he was instructed to lock all the exits, and when he saw them coming, he couldn't tell if they were the real ones or not. Kat asks him for directions to the hospital, and he points out what route she should follow. When they catch the eyes of the man who had been pursuing them, the security guard hastily leads the women to the hospital. There are concerns all over town. No one knows for sure what's going on. There are speculations all over if it's an anarchist attack or the effects of pharmaceutical antidotes. On the other hand, Jim is desperately trying to find Kat, despite the chaos and gruesome activities going on in town. Just as he takes a break, he sees a group of kids attacking a man. An attempt to be a hero goes wrong, and the children pursue him. Jim runs back to his bike and zooms off. Meanwhile, Kat and Molly arrive at the hospital, and fortunately, Molly gets attended to. Molly is led to tears by Kat's kindness. She's grateful to Kat for not giving up on her and saving her life. Molly tells Kat that she will always remember her kindness to her. Kat just wants Molly to take care of herself. Molly is wheeled away by a nurse, and the atmosphere calms. Kat borrows the security guard's phone to use when suddenly, everyone's attention is brought to the TV. The president addresses the people. He apologizes for not addressing them earlier. He urges the people not to make assumptions about the crisis, but assures them that it will be handled by the government. He reassures them that the matter will be confronted swiftly and efficiently. In the president's closing remarks, the president tells the people that, though the Alvin virus hasn't been outrightly proven to be the cause of the series of chaotic events occurring, he urges the people not to rule it out as a possibility. He charges them up to stand strong, that they will surely prevail. While all of this pans out, Kat hurriedly texts Jim. As the president exits, the general mounts the podium to continue from where he stopped. He continues by saying that the country may be facing a virus that turns infected people into homicidal sadistic maniacs. According to their data resources, an estimate of nationwide infection is between 15 to 20%. An estimate of over 4 million infected people out on the street engaging in hostility on the streets. Just as the general continues to speak, all of a sudden his appearance changes, and there on national TV, he exhibits the hostility he condemns. The general takes out a grenade, shoves it into the president's mouth, and the president is decapitated on television. The people in the hospital are terrified of the outcome of events. This aggravates the crowd and it leads to a commotion. One of the policemen there is then forced to bring out his weapon in hopes of calming the turbulence. Just then, Kat sees the man from the train standing outside the hospital. He breaks the glass of the entrance and, in the process, hits the policeman standing there. This man with an axe is not alone. He has company of fellow psychopaths, and they instantly begin to attack everyone there. Kat escapes from the man, but Molly isn't as fortunate. The man finds her sitting all alone in one of the hospital rooms, helpless. He is pleased to find her in that condition, and Molly is unable to defend herself from the vile man. It's such a disturbing scene that even Kevin, the security guard, can't bear to experience it as he hides under a bed. Meanwhile, Jim is finally able to reach Kat. He receives messages from her, stating that she lost her phone and is at the hospital unhurt. Jim immediately calls her. He's concerned for her safety and wants to come to her. However, that might not be a good idea, and the chances of Jim making it to her are slim. She informs him that the hospital has been invaded by the psychopaths, and not even the cops have survived. Kat is terrified and doesn't know what to do, but Jim tries to calm her down. He advises her to find a place to hide. He promises to find her, but in the meantime, she should stay low and ensure that the phone is on silent. Kat tries to reassure Jim of her never-ending love for him, but while she talks, Jim hallucinates and sees a mannequin come to life. Kat manages to snap him out of it when she calls his name over and over, trying to ensure that he's okay. He reassures her that he's fine and only got a little lightheaded, and on that note, the two hang up. Just as Kat puts the phone down, suddenly, the alarm at the hospital goes off, and red lights begin flashing. The scene shifts to Kevin, who finally comes out of hiding. Did he make the right decision, or should he have stayed back? He sees a group of maniacs but manages to escape them. He then arrives at where he left Molly earlier. She's seated motionless, and Kevin is uncertain if she's alive. And if she's alive, is she normal? As Kevin takes a few uncertain steps forward, he lands his feet on a stainless steel bowl, and of course, it makes a sound that draws Molly's attention. Molly turns around, and she's vicious. As Kevin attempts to run away, he bumps into the group he had earlier escaped from, and they pin him to the ground. Tragically, Kevin meets his gruesome end. We shift our focus back to Kat, who is waiting patiently for Jim to find her. Suddenly, the man from the train earlier just won't move on and let her be. He's determined to get Kat, but she's too quick for him. As the man searches for Kat, he loudly boasts of the despicable things he did to Molly, and how Kat is next on his list. This time, Kat is one step ahead of the man. She sneaks up behind him with a fire extinguisher and uses it on him. The impact makes him fall, and Kat doesn't stop there. She then begins to use the extinguisher to hit his head multiple times, and his blood bursts all over Kat's body. Suddenly, a door opens, and an undisclosed individual wearing a protective suit stands by it. Meanwhile, the other maniacs have found their way to Kat and are coming at her at full speed. Kat immediately rushes to the person in a suit, and they shut the door before the maniacs get to them. The person then instructs Kat to get into the shower and cuff herself. He points a weapon at her, urging her to do as he says. These are just safety measures he's taking as he cannot tell if she's infected, so the man claims. Kat reluctantly gets in the shower, and as the water pours, washing off the blood on her body, the man goes to test her. After the brief test, he sees that she is not infected and might be immune. He then asks for her blood type. Kat is curious to know if he is a doctor, but the man says he's a virologist. He asks if Kat has any children, and when he realizes she doesn't, he expresses his concern for those who have, and how the Alvin virus has ruined all their lives in future. Kat takes off all her clothes, and the man runs the shower again. After the shower, the man clears his suspicions about Kat being infected, as he believes that if she were, she would be showing the symptoms already. He removes the handcuffs and tells her that he will take blood samples when she gets dressed. He apologizes for scaring her with the gun and claims he only uses it for protection. Dr. Wong begins to let out his frustrations. For a full year, he had tried to warn people about the virus. He had predicted that the virus would mutate, but no one had taken his warnings seriously because no one believed doctors anymore. He further claims that the government didn't take the necessary measures because the people couldn't endure a lockdown, and the government feared it would lead the country to recession. The man begins to educate Kat about the virus. He compares it to an evil spirit that affects the limbic system in a person's brain, then connects the area that regulates aggression to the area that governs one's desires. He believes the viral mutation happened by natural processes. He further states that the limbic system controls humans more than any other part of the body. He says there are rare cases of patients with affected limbic systems where they continue to feel thirsty and drink water endlessly until they drown themselves. The doctor also explains that these people aren't behaving so vilely out of their own doing, but as a result of the endless desire in their limbic system to be vicious and vile. He thinks that they cry because they feel guilt each time they perform such atrocities. Kat finishes getting dressed and the doctor suggests they run the blood test. She then decides to trash the old clothes, but then she sees a moving nylon. Kat's curiosity is piqued and so she tears open the nylon. Suddenly the doctor injects her from behind and then cuffs her. He tells her that he has injected her with the alvin virus, and he'll observe her to see if she starts showing symptoms. If she doesn't start showing symptoms, he will use her to make a vaccine. But if she starts showing symptoms, however, he threatens to end her life. The agitated man tries to explain the situation about the infants to Kat. He tells her that when he had earlier come into the room, the babies were abandoned. He believes the only rational decision that could have been taken was to prevent the infants from being found by the maniacs. The doctor claims he needed to save their lives by ending it. In his opinion, by doing so, he gave them a much better fate than the one they would have had in the hands of the psychopaths. The doctor also injected some of them with the virus in hopes of getting a cure, but it didn't work, and the government blatantly ignored his pleas to be rescued. Meanwhile, Jim has arrived at the hospital, and Kat sends him a message with her location. After waiting a while, the doctor goes back to check on Kat to see if she has been infected yet, but she's not. He then takes her with him. He has asked for a helicopter to meet them on the rooftop. As the two step out of the room, they are both wary of the danger that lurks. The doctor stands in front of Kat armed, and they walk slowly to the exit. However, Kat notices that the axe which was once on the floor is now gone. But then, the doctor is suddenly attacked. One of the maniacs appears from nowhere and chops off his foot. The doctor screams in pain as he falls to the ground, but he manages to shoot at them before they cause any more damage. The agonized man screams at Kat for help. He tells her she won't be able to make it to the roof without him, and Kat, who has just been standing there with her hands on her ears, manages to help the man. As the two struggle to make their way out, Jim barges in suddenly, not in the way Kat would have hoped. Jim is now infected, and Kat is saddened to see Jim in this state. As Jim rushes to the doctor to attack him, the doctor fires at him. Kat tries to prevent the doctor from shooting Jim. Though she is aware that Jim is now infected, she still loves him dearly and doesn't want to see him get hurt. However, the doctor pushes her away and is still bent on shooting Jim, because at this point, it's either Jim or him. Unfortunately, the doctor is no match for him, and Jim swiftly stabs the doctor on his neck. As the doctor bleeds, he confesses to secretly relishing the pain he caused those. A sign that the doctor has gotten infected with the virus. Kat manages to escape and move to another room, locking the gate before Jim gets to her. Kat hates to see Jim in this condition. She asks him how he feels, and he claims to be in a state of euphoria. He says that he has now found purpose in life, and when Kat asks what the purpose is, he says she is his purpose. Jim further claims to have enjoyed how desperate Kat was for him to help her when they spoke over the phone. Jim makes a lot of unhinged statements, and his words begin to terrify Kat, and she quickly moves away from him. She runs to the rooftop and finds the helicopter that the doctor spoke about. Jim, on the other hand, watches her escape from him with a grin on his face.